And we're live. Smile, everybody. Big smile. All right. Hi, everybody. Today is Monday, the 8th of June, and we are at the new SUMO Community meeting with a very special guest. Please say hello to Patrick Finch. Hello, Patrick.
Hello, Madalena. Hello, everybody.
So Patrick is joining us from the Content Services team, and he will help us clarify some of the questions and concerns we have around tiles. Before we start, I have pasted the Etherpad for today in #sumo on IRC, so check it out. That's where you will also find the questions that our community has posted for Patrick, and also for SUMO staff and admins. Please make sure you also update the Etherpad with the latest things going on in your area. Those will just be there for people to read later. That's just for you to know. So we can get started. I would just want to say hello to Philip. Welcome. I think for now you're the only.
Looks like it,
yeah, that's fine. We're recording it so everybody can watch it afterwards. No panic. So let's get started. So Patrick, do you want to start by telling us a bit about tiles and why are we doing this and what's the whole background of it? Because I don't think everybody knows.
Sure. Thanks, Madalena, and thanks everyone for the questions that were prepared in advance. They were, I think, very well researched and really, I think, are going to move us forwards in what we need to do in supporting tiles. So thank you for that. Just starting off with, let's say, some big picture context around content services. If we think back to the origins of Firefox, what it really served to do was light a fire under web development. We know that it wasn't necessarily, the web wasn't necessarily the preferred way that the internet would be developed and consumed according to, let's say, the big platform powers of 15, 20 years ago. And Firefox succeeded in really making the web better for users, better for developers, and really made it the dominant way that we consume desktop computing now. One of the many things that we did was to really champion the user and champion user agency. Amongst other things in that was the ability for users to block content and more recently to understand the nature of online tracking and to take measures against the more invasive advertising technologies that have been out there. At the same time, we have to understand that the world around us is changing, and that we want to protect the health of the web, the health of a common space which is not owned or controlled by any one entity. And part of that is also caring for its economic value, the performance of the web economically. Another way of looking at this is to say that if you look at how much investment on development on mobile is going into native platforms, it's not hard to understand why that's happening. It's following the money. And we need to make sure that publishers, people that are contributing a lot to the web, also have a path to their own sustainability, which isn't invasive, which isn't unacceptable to us. So a couple of years ago, to get more specific, and Philip, you sent me, or I received through the SUMO team, you asked some questions about this background, and I hope you got my response. There was, I think, quite good specific points about this. We were looking at the impact of blocking third-party cookies by default. And really the analysis was that it wouldn't necessarily improve a great deal about privacy. There were lots of, I think, false positives and false negatives involved. And equally, this would only serve to concentrate power in the hands of a few first parties. Beyond that, taking more measures to block invasive tracking. One, can harm publishers' business, but if it's invasive on users, it's still worthwhile doing. But the second thing is that we're only incentivizing some kind of fairly tasteless metaphor, but an arms race. You know, there is an escalation of invasive measures that are happening on the browser, canvas fingerprinting, super cookies, and so on. So we're really seeking positive influence. We're really seeking to create advertising experiences, monetization experiences, which respect users' privacy, respect users' control, work for publishers, work for the web. So that was, I think, the origin of founding content services within Mozilla. And I think that was a decision taken maybe summer 2013. We're working on plans to build that cathedral. The first place that we need to start is proving that you can have effective advertising that respects users' privacy, essentially. So we're building what we could call our own owned and operated advertising inventory in the shape of tiles. Now, we're focusing a great deal on the advertising components, and I think we will in this call, because these are some of the most sensitive ones, the ones that cause us most concern about how we are serving users. They also cause a great deal of concern in terms of the nature of relationships that we form with partners that wish to advertise with us, how we ensure that we are serving them appropriately, how we ensure that we are still treating our users as sovereign. So I think we will focus on those aspects. There are a number of other things that we can do with suggested tiles that are interesting, of course, in terms of promoting Mozilla's products, Mozilla's values, Mozilla's causes, other causes that we care about, in terms of providing richer experiences in the new tab. I think in general there are things in the new tab which look broken to me superficially. We know that they are broken for privacy reasons, but still we can improve that experience. So that gets us to suggested tiles, and I'll take a pause there and see if there's any questions.
Any questions so far? Feel free to raise your hand and just say, hey, I don't understand what you're saying. All right, I think we're good for now.
Thanks. I read over the weekend that you shouldn't talk for like more than 40 seconds at a time. If you do, people think you're talking too long. So before we dive into the questions on suggested tiles, like every product at Mozilla, suggested tiles need to deliver user benefit. Right? They need to actually be a feature that users like. They need to advance our mission, and they need to be sustainable. They need to drive towards the project sustainability. Some products arrive at sustainability sooner than others, right? I think it's fair to say that suggested tiles and the content services roadmap has, contribution to sustainability of the project nearer than, a longer-term play like the Firefox OS, which of course takes a much bigger investment up front. Saying that, I also think it's important to acknowledge that there are people that object to advertising. There are people that object to advertising philosophically, and I've definitely in my life read a lot about that, and I can understand that worldview quite clearly. There are other people that say it isn't our role to be engaging here. There I probably don't agree. I don't think that there are rules for what we should and shouldn't do. In terms of the functionality that we want to deliver, I think we understand what we should and shouldn't do based on how we advance our mission and how we advance the experience of and the control of users. So with that, I think I'll dive into the questions. I've got them in front of me, if that's all right.
Sounds good.
Thanks. Thanks for speaking my living. I hate just listening to my own voice. Nothing worse than when you have an echo. Right? So I think the first question that I saw was, by Mozilla self-assessment, is Firefox adware? And Philip, I think this was your question? Or one of your questions?
Yes.
So I think it's a great place to start, actually. And of course, I think adware is a loaded term to some extent. I would not describe Firefox as adware once it contains adverts. For me, adware is typically software that's funded solely by adverts, or by adverts, or you can update to a paid version. Right? Suggested tiles will, is intended to deliver revenue to Mozilla, but it's very, very easy to switch off. All right, and this is a very important point for us. Something that we're testing in release channels now is to see that users are able to turn it off if they want to turn it off, and we know that there is a minority, a significant minority of users that just don't want it, right? And it's important that they can switch it off. Generally, in adware, you can't switch ads off unless you buy an upgrade to a non-advertising containing version. So, in my mind, it's pretty different, right? And we expect that some users, many users, will find that some of the things that they see in suggested tiles will be useful to them. So we don't see this as, let me say, something that the user has to suffer or put up with in order to use the product. It does raise a bigger question about the economy of the web, right? Which is to say that the web is, I don't want to say the web is adware exactly, but it conforms more to this model, right? Where you basically have to have adverts shown at you in order to use the web, in order to consume a lot of the web. And understanding the economics of that is, that's part of my job, right? And we want to talk about, we want to look at things like, micropayments, which I think have been held up as a holy grail for a long time of a way to advance direct monetization on the web. And I think that that's a worthwhile thing to look at. At the same time, it's important to understand what that means for a website. Typically, right, the richest part of the population are most inclined to pay for content. And right, there is a thread right now about Facebook, people saying, I want to pay for Facebook, I don't want to have adverts. I don't believe that's going to happen because a small number of people will pay, and then the adverts that are left are worth less to Facebook, and generally people that will pay are even more valuable to advertisers. So I don't think it's a very straightforward thing to say we just need to focus on people being able to pay for content on the web. So I think adverts are here to stay, in other words. Okay, Philip, does that answer the question?
Yeah, it was kind of anticipating the feedback that will come into our forums once this lands.
Yeah,
I'm not sure if this is an answer that is satisfying to all those users as well, but
maybe I need to make the answer a bit shorter. But would you say that the distinction is fair, right? That with suggested tiles, the user just switches them off, and there is no difference, right? There is no penalty to the user for switching them off. They're not expected to pay anything. They just switch them off if they don't want them.
yeah, it's a precursor that it's switchable off. I'm not sure.
Okay. Okay. Well, let's keep looking at that.
Getting into
David?
semantics. Yeah, I was just going to say that, and maybe this is just semantics of what constitutes adware, but I would also add that at least to me, adware implies intrusive ways of displaying ads and like essentially getting in the user's way. And I think that I would say content services suggested tiles is a very, very, very opposite model of that. It's very much not getting in your way. So I think that's, to the original question, Philip, on is Firefox adware, I would say very strongly that it's not, based on that user experience.
This is something that we have to measure as well, right? If users are saying this is getting in my way, this is distracting, this is really detracting from my experience, we have to fix that. If it's an individual tile or if it's the whole design, I don't think it's the whole design, but we do need to have a process in place to measure what people think of individual tiles, and need to follow up on that. I'm going to keep going through the questions because there's quite a few, and I'm taking too long. All right. If no personal data is handed to the advertiser, then why do they have to advertise to an audience they have no idea about? ... question mark. Which is it's a great question, right? This is has been one of the hardest parts of my job, to explain to advertisers that the architecture of suggested tiles, that we are purposefully not collecting and distributing lots and lots of data about people. And I read this somewhere. I heard the whole, the internet described as a futures bubble predicated on user data. Right? There are a lot of organizations out there that just are hoovering in data about users. And what we're saying is you don't need to do this. It's not necessarily effective. Most of that data doesn't get used. And we want to focus on an interest signal, one that is controlled by the user, understood by the user. So what we're saying is if we can deliver an advertising experience that the user isn't in the user's way, that the user understands, that they feel in control of, and that actually speaks to things that they're interested in rather than things that the advertiser thinks they might be interested in, we believe that that can be a more effective model. It won't be the case for all advertisers at first, but we really want to find the ones that it'll work for and get moving there and create a new model where it isn't just a game about slurping down users' information. Anush BMX, I think, asked the question. Do I say that right even? I don't know if they're here. I'll keep going. Next question. Does unchecking the show suggested tiles option on the new tab page prevent data from being collected by Mozilla? I want to say almost entirely. There are two moments when Mozilla sees data, if you like. The most important one, the main one, is when a tile is displayed and the user interacts with it, right? We aggregate data about that and make reports. So if the user doesn't see suggested tiles, there is no data to report. The other time is when Firefox initially downloads a payload of tiles. And this is not information that we collect or store, but we do see an IP address, essentially, pinging our servers for an update for tiles. So we would still see that ping. That data is not collected by us or stored by us, but of course we see that as well. I think I'm probably over-rotating on making that point, but I just want to be really clear about the two times. Next, are you worried users?
The second time, the payload, all of the tiles are downloaded at the same time, so we don't have any data on like specific tiles were downloaded.
Correct.
To a user.
Correct.
Just to be clear about that.
Thanks. And the download is also happening if the option is turned off?
Yes.
Why?
Well, if it wasn't, we'd know it was turned off, I suppose. Beyond that, I think that it's the same for suggested tiles and enhanced tiles. And this is the way that the system has been architected, right, is that there is only reports on interaction with the tiles. In most cases, the payload is small, very small, right? It's not by no means a significant overhead. I think we looked at it. The worst case scenario, if the user was downloading a complete set of new directory tiles, it would be probably around a 370K payload, including network overhead, roughly. In most cases, it's like 2K to 25, 50K, I think. But it's a good point, Philip, right? That it seems redundant somehow. So let me make a note of that. Sorry, I just have to write down. I can't talk at the same time.
I was just thinking about users on metered connections. And
yeah, I had the same thought. Yeah. Okay. Next question from Noah. Are you worried users will consider this an invasion of privacy regardless of the privacy safeguards, cause a negative reaction and result in abandonment of Firefox? Well, yes, if you put it like that, that sounds very worrying, right? It's very important that we make this as transparent as we can to users. I feel that I spoke with a journalist earlier today, and I was really excited by the extent to which they'd understood what we were doing. They'd taken the time to understand it, which I was very grateful to them for, and they were pretty enthusiastic and could see that this did respect the user's privacy. But that's a technology journalist that's taken the time to study a diagram of the architecture. I don't know that a normal user necessarily understands a great deal. So I'm thinking understands a great deal about client-side decisioning and the difference between a first-party and third-party cookie and so on. So we're thinking quite a lot about what we can say to users that will help them understand that this is different. That might amount to saying things that we might even feel are to some extent facile. That is, although we all would know that the fact that you're not dropping a cookie doesn't necessarily mean you're not tracking someone anymore. To most users, the fact that we're not using cookies signals something. So we might choose to make that part of the messaging, so the users at least can have it demonstrate to them in terms that they understand and seem real that this is different. But I need to do more on that. The infographic that we had for the announcement will not work for most users. I do not expect them to invest the time. I wouldn't want them to invest the time in trying to understand that. So I need to do more there. Okay. And then, Philip, you then followed on, especially now that we're on an advertising campaign, claiming that Firefox won't snoop in your private stuff. It's personal to use Firefox. Does this have potential for backfiring? So I agree that we have a philosophy here, and we need to be very, very clear on it, and not everyone will engage close enough to be able to follow what we're saying. It's important we take a stand, though. We believe data should remain personal, that the user should have control over what's going on, and that the exchange of value for their data should be transparent to them. We're working more on that, right? We're not just walking away from this. I'm working with the policy team. Content Services is working with the policy team and Mozilla's marketing groups as well on how we can explore this issue and continue to own this, and not just make statements that might not appear to work well together for people that haven't taken the time or don't have the interest to follow us closely. So, Philip, I agree with the issue. I'm definitely working with other people to make sure that we tell the story. And then you went on to our last marketing push, no corporate, non-compromised. I don't feel we're compromised, very honestly. I really don't feel we're compromised. I feel that we're pursuing our own agenda, more so by doing suggested tiles than other commercial partnerships, quite honestly. I think that this actually speaks more to us being independent than having a handful of very, very major relationships.
So, Patrick, I just wanted to add one thing here, because you have been covering like quite a lot of this whole thing about privacy and etc. I think like one major question that the SUMO community has, and it's not something that you can answer now probably, but something to think of, is basically, so we will have users asking us things like, is Mozilla adware, is Mozilla making compromises, what is Mozilla doing? And I think the question is, how can we as a SUMO community answering users will be able to explain to them in simple language what are we doing, without like the infographic or things, technical things that don't make a lot of sense to a normal user. So I think that's a very important point for us as a community to understand how we can do that in order to make sure that users also understand what we're doing without having like a lot of, I don't know, PR kind of language or whatever infographics. So that's something that maybe you want to take into consideration.
Yes, I would really love it if there'd be a couple of people in the community that would work with me on that as well. It's laid down, I think John99 raised a couple of points about this. We know that there's changes coming in 14, 41, 42. Some of them are fairly trivial and cosmetic and can be addressed, I think, in minor revisions to the knowledge base. But the big change we need to work on is the product page, the Mozilla.org product page, which is linked in product. If you go to learn more about new tab, I think it is. At the moment, what we have there speaks to directory tiles and enhanced tiles, which most users didn't actually see. And I don't think that content is close to doing what we need it to do. It needs to be shorter, it needs to be clearer, and it needs to point users to the relevant SUMO resources, I think. So I'd like to get on that. Shall I try and go a bit quicker through some of these questions?
Yes, please.
All right. Let's verbose mode off. The do not track option in options privacy, is it the only user-facing way to disable both sponsored and suggested tiles? It is not the way to disable tiles. We took a decision a while ago that users that had had do not track set to 1 from before last November wouldn't receive enhanced tiles or suggested tiles. Excuse me. Problem with that is it sends mixed messages, right? Suggested tiles are not tracking users, but we interpreted that most of the early adopters of do not track really did not want to see an advert, so we didn't switch it on. It's not disabled, they can switch it on very easily. The way to switch it off is just to use the control in the new tab, the cogwheel. I don't know, well, we probably need to cover this in the knowledge base somewhere. Excuse me. Next question from Noah was, is there a way to enable only sponsored tiles but disable suggested tiles? I'm a little confused by the question. I guess Noah's saying, can we single out suggested tiles which result from commercial partnerships and opt users out of those but have all the other recommendations? At the moment, the answer is no. That's an interesting enhancement idea, though. Let me take note of that one. Okay, what possible exploit models could ad companies use to bypass Mozilla's privacy safeguards? Nothing is truly anonymous or secure. Again, Noah, I think with the current architecture we have with suggested tiles, there really isn't much of a raised risk profile, right? All the content that's there, the tile comes through us. We vet it. We see what's there. We have pretty clear guidelines on what can't go in. Outside of tiles, there are many things that people do to bypass privacy safeguards. We discussed them earlier. So I think Noah may be confused about the architecture. I'm not sure. I could check in with Noah perhaps later. What would it take for Mozilla and Taskings to reconsider this approach, a data breach privacy leak? I think this may be assuming that the user's history is leaving Firefox. It isn't. Right, very, very limited data is reported to Mozilla by suggested tiles. Next phase for tiles beyond suggested tiles. There's two ways to look at this. One is we will think about what else we could do that's interesting with the user's frequency and new tab. What would be next for tiles, therefore, or maybe looking beyond frequency to other things. But that's really, I mean, there's no plans there. I think that's quite a long way off. What I think would be more inclined to do, the next phase for tiles beyond suggested tiles, we'll be thinking about how we can influence the industry, how we can make this usable to others in some way. There's a number of possible ways to go about that. I'm going to keep going, if that's all right. I'm working through these questions. Is that what's desired by the House? Madalena and Philip, I defer to you guys.
Yes, go on.
Yeah, all right. How much revenue do you expect suggested tiles to generate from Mozilla? I'm afraid I really can't say. It needs to generate revenue. It needs to be valuable for users. Users need to use it, like it. We're going to measure that, and it needs to be able to advance the mission. I really can't make a revenue projection on suggested tiles. It could be significant, but once we stand it up, we're thinking about what's next for how we take it into the industry. Why would an advertiser trust Mozilla's custom anonymized closed system to provide accurate stats that they can't verify for themselves? In other words, how can they tell the data is real without sharing IP addresses or viewing more detailed data? Great question. I should make it clear for anyone watching the recording, that was me reading the question, not me asking that question. We consider tiles to be a well-lit environment, if you like. If you Google something like Lumascape, you can see just how complicated digital advertising has become, display advertising, and there are many possible, let me say, points of failure, areas where an advertiser could be losing out. There was a famous saying, I think, like 100 years ago, that the advertiser knows that half their money is wasted, they just don't know which half. I think that some of that is still true today in digital advertising. If someone is partnering with us, they know who they're dealing with. They can see very clearly how their tile is displayed. There are many issues that the industry is struggling with, like viewability, which really aren't a problem for us. But above all, a lot of our deals, probably most of our deals, are based on results, right? Clicks. So the partner, of course, sees the clicks, right? Because the user clicks through to them. We report clicks, we report impressions. The partner sees clicks, and those two things match. Okay, I'm going to keep going. Philip, you highlighted the creative for a direct response advert for FedEx, which I saw as well. You asked about creative guidelines. The creative guidelines are on content.mozilla.org, and I actually investigated that FedEx tile because generally I think we should be aiming to deliver interesting digital content experiences, and this was a pretty straightforward direct response kind of advert. So I asked about it. It turns out that it ran as a 4-day test. I've got nothing against FedEx, but I didn't think it looked like a great advert for suggested tiles. I could, though, imagine, well, it didn't run as a suggested tile, it ran as a directory tile. I could imagine a world, though, where a Firefox user might find that useful, right? If someone's an eBay seller, for example, and they are using a lot of courier services, conceivably they could find value in it. But in general, I think we agree that we don't expect to make adverts that look like that, and I think that was quite an exceptional case. It was a test. Okay, then there's a lot of questions from John99 about tiles not working as expected regarding populating history. he says that he couldn't remove 2 directory tiles, but he could remove all the rest. I really need to follow up with him offline, I think. It's important to understand that we landed on beta 39, and the suggested tiles code for affiliate tiles, Mozilla advertising, not sponsored content, is in 39 beta, but the rest of suggested tiles was backed out. And the UI will change from 39 or from 40 when suggested tiles first land to 41 again slightly. There'll be cosmetic changes. He asks why it wasn't tested fully before release. It hasn't been released yet, so I'm a little confused. But we're looking for longer in beta at the moment with a lot of other things integrating. Another complaint about the project wiki page is insufficient. I think from the comments, John99 is looking for the product page I mentioned earlier, and I would like to work with him and others on improving that. He mentions here that he assumed that we were rushing things through to keep sponsors happy, and that he assumed that there will be features that are NDA that are not dictated, that are dictated by sponsors and so on. I could address that directly, and there aren't. Of course, we want to understand the requirements that an advertiser has and see what we can do to deliver them in a way that respects privacy, right? That's the nature of what we're doing. But I've not encountered any requirements that we are keeping secret. Why are IP addresses held up to 7 days? Why not a shorter time span like 24 hours? Well, this is for reporting, right? We're reporting on billions of impressions. This is a data warehouse, and I think it's simply a question of enough time for operations to make those reports and verify those reports. It's on the basis of these reports that we are actually forming a relationship with a partner. I think that's why 7 days. Getting it down to 24 hours, I think, would be lovely. I'm not speaking on behalf of the engineering team, though I'm not sure how feasible that is. Okay, we've got 17 minutes left, and I think we're nearly there. I'll keep going. You still with me, guys?
Yes,
yeah?
yes. We're listening
right.
and taking notes. Don't worry.
All right. What kind of tile performance can be determined from IPs, geolocation, popularity, click rate, etc.? Obvious question, but I'd like to hear your take on it, asks Noah. I think Noah's asking about what reports does Firefox make from interactions on the new tab. I hope this is well documented. I think it is. I think it's well documented on the revision of the knowledge base article that Johnny worked on. But by IP address, by memory, it tells you the tiles that have been displayed and how many times they've been displayed, if they've been pinned or rolled over or moved or hovered over or clicked or blocked. There's a difference between rolling over and hovering over, of course. And it tells you, I think, the position that they're presented in on the new tab. And for enhanced tiles only, it tells you the frequency score. I think that's it. How can I turn it off, and what does Mozilla exactly store? So we can switch off suggested tiles very easily, as we talked about, but not Firefox downloading the payload of the tiles, as we discussed earlier. And Philip, I took your comment there. What does Mozilla exactly store? As we talked about, for up to a week, we store the IP addresses against the tiles interaction. Right? So that doesn't contain browsing history. It's possible for a suggested tile, given that it's served against a category which is an abstraction of browsing history, you could say that you could infer something. And that's saved for up to a week, at which time it's anonymized. The IP addresses are stripped from the data. And then that data is held anonymized for 13 months. I hope that's precise enough. If not, I can follow up in writing. Getting this documented would be great. I think a lot of it is documented already. You may notice we have a knowledge-based article on this. It may, however, need revising. Yes, I think it will. This is John99 talking. Yeah, I think as we've backed stuff out and so on, we need to make some changes. I actually noticed on this thread on the SUMO forum that John99 said, well, there's a lot of blogs coming out suddenly, and we definitely should have done a better job of saying we're making this announcement now, because there were 3 blog posts which were meant to be complementary, one about data, one about the data policy, and one of the commercial announcement. I'm glad that he found the infographic useful. Okay, and then he adds background and further info related to his bullet points above. Problem with history tiles not working as expected, and he makes, I think he's talking about directory tiles rather than suggested tiles, but we need to figure that out. He also asks about having the frequency algorithm documented in the user-facing documentation. This is really why I'd love to have someone in the SUMO community sort of consulting on what we should put in the product page, right? Will a user, I mean, there's a Wikipedia article on frequency, but I'm not sure if people really want to understand the algorithm in depth, if they want to understand it to some extent. I'm curious about that. I would like to, I think, have a deeper discussion about that with folk in the community. About really, we want to put a few clear messages in front of the users, and then I think give them the ability to find more resources in SUMO as they want them. So he likes the tiles page for developers, but yeah, indeed, it's inadequate as a product page. That's what I want to work on. He also asks about the classic setting for tiles. That is deprecated. We had, for enhanced tiles, we had 3 settings, I think: enhanced, classic, and off. Being an old-fashioned sort of a chap, I quite like the sound of classic, right? And what that means is the way it worked before enhanced tiles. So the new cogwheel interface hopefully makes that an awful lot clearer, that they will include suggested tiles or not, or you can have your history, or I think we call it history, or you can have the new tab as blank as it was until summer 2012. And I know that there are arguments to have the new tab just as blank, and that some users prefer that they don't want distractions as they're starting a new task, as they perceive them. Other users want to have tiles and suggestions there. We've burnt through all the questions with 12 minutes to spare.
So there are a few things that I see that Philip added.
Oh, great. He's smiling. His eyes are wide.
Yeah, so there is one question. Can adware on a user system hijack the tiles capability in Firefox by modifying the browser.newtabpage.directory source? Can you see that question, Patrick?
I'm sorry, I'm not looking. Is this in the Etherpad?
Yes, it's line 106.
Have you just very kindly forwarded me the link? Thank you. Okay.
So I've added them a couple of minutes before the meeting.
So can adware on the user system hijack the task capability in Firefox by modifying the browser.newtab page directory source preference? Explain that on ads. So if we see people trying that kind of attack, we will of course need to take countermeasures, and that will also show that we're being successful, I suppose. I don't mean that there's a flippant answer. What would be a more accurate answer is I couldn't tell you what the how easy or how trivial or how difficult that would be right now. Let me find out.
Because we see adware changing the new tab page itself, the homepage, and so on. So
yeah, I know. I mean, your search hijacking is rife, right? You see it so often.
Yeah, that happens. So another question, Philip. I'll leave the big question at the end because I think that's important. How fine-grained will the interest categories be?
How fine-grained will the interest categories be? This is a good question. At the moment, they're fairly coarse. They're based on industry standard, advertising industry standard interest categories, and they are fairly generic, right? Like that you're interested in, you know, Android, and you know, from the context we can infer you're a consumer interested in Android, or that you're interested in a particular sport, or interested in a particular country, right, as a destination or something, or that you're interested in cars. At the moment, they're fairly coarse. I think we'll see how good these are. One thing I'm interested to do is to really think about a couple of categories that we could really get much more ingrained on, and really see more about transmitting more signal of users' intent to deliver them something useful at the right time, rather than something that they're generally interested in.
All right. This is a very good question that I would also love an answer to. Will there be someone from the content services team, Mozilla monitoring and answering critical users' questions on SUMO about this feature once it's live?
Yes.
So that would be very nice. That's just my feedback. Just in case, I mean, there might be quite a lot of people asking about tiles or complaining about tiles, so we would definitely use some help from the content services team.
Yes, and let me talk about the rollout a little bit, which is we're not going to just, you know, suddenly one day the user's going to start using Firefox and they will find lots of adverts in there. There'll be other, you know, promoted content, much of it non-commercial, much of it from Mozilla. And it will start gradually as well. Right? We are going to go carefully. We're working hard, and someone noticed that they thought we were rushing through. We are definitely moving as quickly as we can, but we're going to introduce tiles to the users cautiously. Right? We understand that, this can be in some way for a user disturbing, right? To see an advert where they didn't see one before, if they don't want it, they don't understand it, and so on. So yes, let me follow up with you, Madalena, on how we make sure that we have a good handshake between SUMO and client services on being able to answer users' questions. And hopefully, if we get the documentation right up front and get the message right to the user up front, we can answer their questions in product really well.
Yeah, that would be great. And I think the SUMO community would love to help there with feedback, with the product page and everything else that we're looking at. We just need to make sure that people know that the content services team is open to that feedback, and we can work together in making that better. So I get a thumbs up from you. Cool.
Yes.
All right. So last 5 minutes. So Philip, do you want to basically sum up the question that you have around how it's
a little bit about conflicts of interest or different goals for different kind of people.
Yeah.
And how to reconcile. I mean, you have answered this in writing before and said that facilitating connections between users and brands is not the goal of Mozilla or a Firefox product, but we have a part of this feature being in the product. Yeah.
No, I mean, so I understand. I understand the point. I think. As I said at the start, right? For me, there were fairly clear imperatives for us to work in this space, and you know, we have to be sincere if we go into partners and saying we're going to make a recommendation experience for you that is going to actually work and was going to be better for you than the things that you're maybe doing today, which we don't think you should be doing, and maybe you don't think you should be doing. And also part of that is speaking in the language that shows that we understand the problem the way they see it. I don't think that it has the capacity to change the nature of the project, the nature of what we care about, the nature of how we drive our mission. To be really clear, I really want suggested tiles to work really well for advertisers that are respecting users and that have something worth advertising to users. But I also know why we do that, what it's in service of. And I don't think that it is a diversion from the work of Mozilla. In the same way, I mean, it's not our mission to facilitate connections between users and search engines, right? But we very happily promote search engines in the product. In fact, this was actually no differentiation for Firefox, right? The fact that it had a search box with a search provider that you didn't have to navigate to first. Where I will say I think that we need to evolve, where I do think Mozilla is changing, I don't think it's content services led or content services driven, but I think it's important that we continue to make excellent client software that helps users use the web on a variety of devices. But we also have to, I think, look up the stack where users are engaging with services where the industry is being driven, and not say that that's someone else's business. Right? It's what's driving the web. It's how the web works. We're not comfortable with it. And there are things that we can do there that are better. The last way I think about this, in big terms, if you like, is when it comes to shipping client software, we feel pretty comfortable with what's right and what's wrong. And although being FLOSS isn't, the law for everything we ship, it's an important point on our compass, right? It's a way that we understand, are we doing the right thing or not? And if we're not shipping something that's FLOSS, do we understand why we are not doing that? Right? We understand the rules of the game for client software in a way. I don't think that there is any kind of similar coherent body of thought right now for the use of data, for what a user can expect. This is a topic, it's an issue, right? It's affecting how people perceive the internet. And different people are pursuing this with different agendas. But there isn't, to me at least, a coherent philosophical body of thought on this is the right way that a user's data should be managed in the cloud. This is the right way that a user's data should be managed by a company they have a first-party relationship with, an organization they have a third-party relationship with. And I think that's territory that we need to get into and occupy and instantiate our values. So I'm not worried about having direct commercial relationships with advertisers affecting the project in any negative way. In fact, I think it probably is in some ways liberating if we can have dependencies on many partners rather than on a handful of very powerful ones. I do think that this is the space that we need to be thinking about and where we need to bring our values across. I don't know if that is a better or worse answer than the one I provided you in writing, Philip. I'll let you judge, and maybe you want to judge later, but that's how I think about it.
Should we let you think on it, Philip?
You want an answer?
No, you don't need to. We can talk offline.
Fine. We can talk. Anyway, we're actually time. And this was a lot of information and a lot of things. So thank you so much, Patrick, for joining us and for trying to explain some of the things that are happening with tiles. I know this can be quite overwhelming for a lot of people.
It's my pleasure. And Philip, thank you for the questions now and the questions on email. Anytime you want to talk more about it, you know how to get hold of me?
I guess I can find out your email address and
perfect. No. Great. Okay.
Yeah, Philip, I can give you the email. And anyway, we'll follow up afterwards, Patrick, with all the questions that John99 had. And like, I assume more feedback will come after people will see this call and they will read the notes. So we'll keep in touch and make sure that.
I'll write you a note with the actions I took here as well. I took 5 actions here. I'll follow up in writing with you on what they are.
Okay, that's perfect, and I'll share them with the community as well, just to make sure that everybody's in the loop.
Okay, sorry to go over.
No, that's fine. I hope we didn't take too much of your time. So thanks, Patrick. Talk to you later. And thanks everybody who participated. I hope this was helpful, and I'm waiting for your feedback and follow up on this. If you have any more questions that you want to ask Patrick or anything related to tiles, just follow up in the Etherpad or on the thread on the community forums. And that being said, have a great week, and I'll see you online. Bye, guys.
Bye-bye.